Catholics are mad about the mysteries of our faith, but we also delight in fictional stories that sweep us away in the thrill of Catholic characters risking it all to discover the truth. Catholic attorney and homeschooling dad Antony Kolenc is back to tell us about his latest mystery for young readers, his new mystery, Murder at Penwood Manor.
Welcome to Homeschooling Saints, the podcast that helps you create the homeschool you love for the people you love. Our host is Lisa Mladinich, a Catholic life coach, TV host, best-selling author, and an instructor at Homeschool Connections.
Before we get started, remember to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you're watching on YouTube, click the bell to join our channel. Hello and welcome. I'm Lisa Mladinich. Today we're talking with Antony Kolenc about his new mystery, Murder at Penwood Manor. Antony Baron Kolenc is the author of the Harwood Mysteries, an inspirational medieval fiction series for youth that has won over a dozen book awards. He is also the host of the radio show and podcast, The Shepherd's Pie, which applies faith-based experiences to our messy lives. He is a retired Air Force officer and he currently teaches at Ave Maria School of Law. Antony is also a columnist for Practical Homeschooling magazine. He and his family live in Jacksonville, Florida, and you can find Antony Kolenc at www.antony, A-N-T-O-N-Y, Kolenc, Kolenc.com, and that's in the show notes. It's so good to have you back on the program, Tony.
Lisa, thanks so much for having me back. I always enjoy coming to talk to you and to homeschoolers, actually.
Yeah. As a homeschooling dad, you have such a heart for what we do and why we do it. And that's so much a part of your series. I'm so happy about book 5 and great to see Loyola Press getting behind such a great historical mystery series for our young readers. We really need that support as authors. So would you just say a little bit about the series for those who didn't hear your previous 2 interviews? And I have those links in the show notes. But yeah, just give us some context.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and Loyola has been wonderful. This is a 6-book series, and book 5, Murder at Penwood Manor, is the latest. Book 6, a title to be released later, is actually going to be out in 2024 sometime, probably late in the year. And that's going to end the series. So the series takes place in 12th century England. It actually is a historical fiction series, but it has a very kind of Harry Potter vibe to it, which was what I was going for. I wanted it to be kind of an exciting mystery series, but also one that kind of is in a real place and time with some real history going on and some good, Catholic themes or Christian themes that are really running through the series. So book 1, I've talked about before, Shadow in the Dark, kind of introduces us to this world of 12th century England, to our main character, Zan, our protagonist, who starts off as an 11-year-old boy who he gets orphaned and he winds up being raised by these monks at Harwood Abbey in Yorkshire, England. And there he makes friends with Lucy, one of the girls whose father left her there at the nunnery while he was traveling around. So he has this little partner in crime, and they have to solve kind of the spooky mystery. And in book 1, Zan has also got amnesia, and he doesn't even know who he is. So that's how he winds up getting his new name, Zan, short for Alexander. And then in book 2, we fast forward a little bit to the Haunted Cathedral, and Zan and Lucy, who are on the cover here, actually wind up in Lincoln, England, which is a major city, about a 2-day journey from the Abbey. And there they wind up investigating this mystery of whether this cathedral, Lincoln Cathedral, is actually haunted by the ghost of a little girl. And book 2 is about forgiveness, because Zan has to really come to terms with forgiving the bandits who attacked his village in book 1 and killed his family. And then book 3, The Fire of Eden. You kind of got this Gandalf-looking magician on the front cover. Loyola has done great artwork on all these books. Book 3 takes place kind of again, with Dan and Lucy, and he's solving it's a jewel thief mystery. Kind of who stole this Ruby on the night of before the ordination of one of the monks. And so Zan and Lucy and his other friends kind of are figuring that out. I forgot to mention in book 2, the other main character, this other girl character, Christina, is introduced. She lives in Lincoln. And Christina is actually the main character in book 4 with Zan, The Merchant's Curse, which takes place back in Lincoln again. And there you got this kind of witchy woman on the cover. And in that book, Zan and Christina, because Lucy's not in book 4, Zan and Christina are trying to figure out, is this woman who has cursed Zan's business partner, a witch? Is this a real curse? Why is the guy dying? And all this kind of stuff. So there's a lot more I can tell you about the series, but essentially it follows, Zan and his friends starting at age 11 all the way up to about age 16 through their teen years as they kind of solve all these spooky mysteries in historical times. And book 5 is the one that I know you're going to want to talk about here in a second.
Yeah. And I just want to say for those of you listening, there's a lot of controversy about the Harry Potter stories. And so understand that there's a kind of a delightful, intriguing vibe that is coming through in these stories, but they're not anything like Harry Potter in any other way. They're so rich and so pure. They're beautifully written. They're terrific stories. I'm so just delighted to be helping our homeschool audience to find this series for your kids. It's a safe place for them spiritually and otherwise. So just please know that this is something you can get behind.
Thank you for saying that, Lisa, because it's true. Because I write the stories so they kind of have this spooky mystery vibe to them, some parents might get the impression that, like, oh, it's got magic and the occult and all this stuff. It doesn't have any of that, as you mentioned. But I'm also trying to create sort of that mood so that the teen readers are really going to be engrossed in the mysteries and try to figure out, well, what is actually going on here? So thank you for saying that.
Oh, you're so welcome. I think it's important. We don't want any doors closing inadvertently. So say a little bit first before we dive in. Why are you writing for teens, Tony?
Like you pointed out, I mean, there's a lot of controversy over our books that are available for teens. And there are some of us authors, Christian authors out there really trying to write good books for Christian teens, Catholic teens, really any teens, because the garbage that's being released. I mean, we thought Harry Potter was controversial. Harry Potter is nothing compared to what's coming out through the mainstream presses right now. And so as a homeschooling dad, my kids are grown now. My youngest just graduated college, actually. But as a homeschooling dad for all those years, when I first started writing this series, that was what the thought was, hey, it would be great to have something of the same kind of quality and pace as a Harry Potter series that would really grab a young reader, but also something that wasn't going to have all of the downside of some of these. And again, the downside is only getting more down in recent years. And I'll put a quick plug in here. I know you have it in your show notes, but CatholicTeenBooks.com. We have about 16 authors who are writing for this age range, middle grade, high school, of all different kinds: histories, mystery, saint stories, contemporary, pro-life, chastity, you name it. There are books on that site, including my series, The Harwood Mysteries, that are really meant to be good, safe reading for our teens today. So I would definitely want your listeners to go there too, because there's a lot of books out there beyond my Harwood Mysteries.
Wonderful. And so many of our young people love to write too. And you're one of our founding members at the Catholic Writers Guild. Tony, you've contributed so much there over the years as an attorney, as a writer. And I love that these 16 writers have come together to create a landing place for our parents to find good teen fiction. It's just so important that we work together as a family.
Yeah, now I wish I could take credit for founding the Catholic Writers Guild. I was one of the early joiners, but honestly, that the Catholic Writers Guild, which again, anybody who wants to learn to write should look into the TWG. I know that's where I met you, Lisa. Yeah, I mean, it's such a great place, and honestly, everything I've achieved in writing has been due to the fellowship and mentorship of my fellow Christian writers there at the Catholic Writers Guild. So I'm deeply in their debt, I assure you.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a great bargain too. I think it's still about $40 a year to be a member, and the benefits
Yeah.
are incredible. Yeah, so lots of good stuff there. All right, so tell us a little bit about what inspired book 5 and Murder at Penwood Manor. And just tell us the things that you love about it too.
All right. So like the other books, I wanted to write a murder mystery. Every book has kind of a different focus. Book 1 is sort of this, he's got to figure out his identity. Book 2 is this kind of ghost story. Book 3 is this jewel thief story. Book 4 is sort of a witch, story. And so I was like, it's time for me to write a murder mystery, whodunit. So every book kind of has a different flavor. So I was excited about that. I really wanted I grew up reading Agatha Christie novels, so I really liked the idea of being able to bring in kind of this cast of suspects to try to figure out who actually committed the murder. And the other thing I really like about book 5 is there's been this relationship building between Zan and his friends, especially Lucy and Christina. And I'm not going to give any spoilers here, but let's just say Zan, as a teenage boy, and 2 pretty teenage girls, has sometimes been kind of sweet on one or both of these girls. And book 5 finally kind of brings this to a head. By now they're much older than they were when they started at 11. But, in the Middle Ages, kids got married when they were 12 and 13 years old. That's when they really entered adulthood to some extent. And so it wouldn't be unusual for Zan to be married at 14, 15, 16 years old. And so there's this kind of sweet romance in book 5, which, has been building sort of in the others, especially book 4 sort of brings it out. But I really like that. In fact, one of my Catholic teen book authors, I think, Leslie Wall, I think, was the one who said she didn't realize book 5 was going to have this, kind of sweet romance in it. And she loves writing these romances. She's one of our Catholic teen book authors. And she said loved that too. So I love it too. I don't know. I watch a lot of romantic comedies. What can I say? But the other thing about book 5, which is really cool, is every book has its own theme. Book 5's theme is envy, and we just don't know enough about the vice of envy. It's often mixed up with jealousy, and it's hard to distinguish the two sometimes. And so, again, book 2 is about forgiveness. Book 3 is about pride. Book 4 is about the vanities of this world. It's actually basically it's a case study on the book of Ecclesiastes, my favorite book in the Old Testament. And so it's all about vanity of vanities, all the things in life that are vanities to us. And so book 5 kind of takes up the theme of envy, and which, with a murder mystery, envy is in fact one of the vices that can lead people to want to kill, and that's what winds up happening in this story. So it's exciting.
Nice. Oh, I just love that you wove that in, not only scriptural, but virtues and sins, that kind of those opposing forces that show up so beautifully in your stories. Everybody, we are going to be right back with Antony Kolenc talking about his new mystery, Murder at Penwood Manor. We're going to hear from our wonderful sponsors at Homeschool Connections, and we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Walter Crawford.
And I'm Maureen Whitman.
We are the co-founders of homeschoolconnections.com and proud sponsors of the Homeschooling Saints podcast,
which is here to help you homeschool more joyfully, more easily, and more effectively.
We want to thank you for listening.
And we invite you to check out our courses at homeschoolconnections.com.
And now, back to our program.
All right, we're back with Antony Kolenc talking about his new mystery, Murder at Penwood Manor. Anything else that you want to tease out for us that you love about the new book? And then I want to get into your stories themselves and talk to you as a writer.
Sure. Let's see. I'm in the middle of, actually, I'm almost at the end of writing book 6 as we do this interview, which is going to be out again in 2024, and we'll conclude the series. So I guess that's the kind of exciting thing. I've been building this series. There's an arc. I mean, you can read any of these books individually and kind of figure out what's going on, because I put enough kind of backstory in each one so that you could read them in any order you would want. But I always say, why would you? Like, start at book 1, work your way up to book 5, because there is a progression in the characters, arc, each of the characters' arcs and where they're headed. And what I love with book 5 is book 5 brings us almost to, where we need to be. The Third Crusade, by the way, is about to kick off. That's the crusade after Jerusalem fell to Saladin, the great sultan in the Middle East, who takes back much of the Holy Land for Islam. And then King Richard the Lionheart, we always see him in like Robin Hood movies. He's the one who goes on the Third Crusade. So I've been leading up to the Third Crusade, and so finally at the end of book 5. Jerusalem finally falls. And then book 6 is going to actually bring my characters out of England, heading towards the Third Crusade. And I love book 6 because it's allowing me to sort of bring the whole story now to kind of this, big arc that we've been building to. So yeah, there are lots of cool historical events going on in the backstories of each of these books.
Yeah, and we've talked about that in previous interviews too, about how homeschoolers can really, as they're studying this period of history, enjoy these incredible stories. And I want to touch into that these are really simply great stories. Too often, there's a lot of well-meaning literature out there that is very agenda-driven. It's so much about accomplishing a thing or establishing a common point of view with the reader that we lose the characters and the delight of simply telling a great story. So these are very Catholic. They're full of real historical people and places, but they're so much fun. Can you tell me a little bit about, and share with also, I hope teen listeners will be getting excited about this too. What helps you, even though you are attending to your values as a homeschool dad and for your readers, how do you just stay on track with telling a great story? Say a little bit about
Yeah, I mean, I try to keep that focus, and it warms my heart whenever somebody like you says that I maybe have hit it, right, because that's what I was going for. I was going for a very good story that especially a teen, or frankly, I mean, honestly, my wife teases me about that. She's like, yeah, you try to say these books are for kids from birth until they're 90. But the reality is, I get a lot of adults, parents and grandparents who wind up reading the series, who love it, college students, who like it. So even though my target audience was teens, I wrote it so it was going to be good storytelling and it could work at a lot of different levels. I think there's a lot of kind of depth to the books. I was inspired, I would say, by J.R.R. Tolkien and The Lord of the Rings. That was my favorite series growing up. I still listen to it on audiobook every few years. And so rich, what he did there was so rich and it works on so many different levels. So I was kind of aiming for that, but also I know even The Lord of the Rings, a lot of young readers are like, well, it gets kind of boring, it's long. So I knew that, with our current audience, we had to write a fast-paced story. And you're right, you can't, there's some well-meaning and not so well-meaning agenda-driven books and movies out there, and it depends on the agenda they're driving. But we've all seen like those Christian movies or maybe read Christian books where it just is like too cheesy, it's too obvious what they're trying to do, and I wanted to avoid that. So it's a little bit of a tightrope to make that work, but I always have to try to bring myself back to bedrock when I'm writing these and go, okay, look, yes, there's these other things that are going on, history and, spiritual themes and battles or whatever. But at the end of the day, book 5 has to be a murder mystery. There has to be a murder. There has to be good suspects. There has to be danger. And I have to make that, the main focus. The other things will sort of take care of themselves as the plot unfolds. And that was the other reason I said it, by the way, in the 12th century is, especially, around monks and nuns who are some of the characters in there, is you don't have to make up anything, fake to be religious. That's how people lived. Being, having the church there and having faith as part of your life was just everyday life for people. So it's very organic. You really can't divorce it from what was going on in life. Like today, that's my major criticism about the mainstream stories, is they want to divorce our faith as if nobody has any faith and God doesn't exist and we just don't even think about him or struggle about anything. Then that's just not real life for, just about anybody I know. We're all struggling. Some of us are struggling, worse than others, but So I wanted to bring all of that into the books, real problems, real struggles, real dangers, and then the other stuff just kind of takes care of itself.
I love that. It's like the characters just naturally breathe Catholic air. And so you don't have to like hit it hard. You don't have to sell it. It's right there. And that's a really neat thing for our kids to absorb too, is that there have been times in history when Christianity was a foregone conclusion, that it was the bedrock of culture. And so it's something that we can reflect on, that we can have discussions about. What else is kind of discussion worthy? What lessons, what kinds of insights? Tell us a little
It's
more.
really relevant. I really wanted to, my characters, although they're medieval characters, I've also sort of updated them so that they would be extra accessible to our teens. So Christine is a good example. She's actually one of my favorite characters. She's not a feminist because it's the Middle Ages, but she's as close to that as you're going to see in her character and how she carries herself. So in some ways, she's like a very modern woman, and so that's kind of fun to be able to have characters to say, look, human nature is what it is. People have had these same feelings that we have now, the same problems that we have now. We've always been dealing with these. It's just whatever, the technology was different, who our leaders were different, how dirty we were because we couldn't take a bath all the time might be different. But it's the same stuff. You read the Bible, going all the way back in the first book of the Bible, it's the same stuff over and over again. So it's very accessible, and I've wanted it to be very accessible. I wanted the history also to be relevant. For instance, gosh, what's going on in the world post 9/11, especially terrorism, Islamic terrorism, Christianity clashing with, Islam. This stuff has been going on from the very beginning of Islam and Christianity's, meeting. And so trying to bring that out, and then also at the same time not doing it in a way that is insensitive. Our modern ecumenical, kind of Catholic view of the world is not as raw and judgmental as maybe it was back in the Middle Ages. So it's like, how do you present that, but at the same time, show sort of like this clash of cultures, which again, because it takes place in England, I don't see that much. But in book six is actually going to take place in an Islamic city in Portugal. And so that's been really challenging for me to kind of, actually have to put my characters into an Islamic culture in a way that is going to be realistic, but also not offensive or any of that. So that's been fun. And yes, schools and homeschool groups are using the books in their religion classes for teaching church history, in social studies to talk about monasticism and feudalism in the Middle Ages, and just the Crusades. I'm going to be giving a talk to a Catholic school of middle schoolers on the Crusades in a few weeks. So all that stuff is there. And that's what, as a homeschooler, frankly, that was all my homeschooling self that was thinking, we need to put all this kind of stuff in there so that you could read these things and parents could be like, let's assign that as supplemental reading for our, social studies curriculum.
I love the idea of sensitively moving through, male-female roles, cultural clashes, all of that, trying to find a way to show how these people would have responded at the time, but through the lens of a sympathetic author, someone who can present people with love. And I think that's what's missing from an awful lot of agenda-driven literature, is the lack of love. And so when you love your characters, whoever they are, you get the nuances of those human beings.
Yeah, absolutely. I want the characters to be real people. And I know a lot of, if you have teens listening to this podcast, a lot of them are authors too, burgeoning authors. I wrote some horrendously bad stuff as a teenager, just knockoffs of Raiders of the Lost Ark and Star Wars, basically. It wasn't actually until I got to the Writers Guild that I really started, learning the craft of writing fiction. But one of the things I learned along the way was your characters have to be real people with real problems. Nobody loves a perfect protagonist because none of us are perfect, right? We can't relate to those people. And so for those teens who are writing stories, realize write the people that write the people that you struggle with. And frankly, usually most authors find themselves in their characters. And so a lot of my flaws are in varied characters throughout the book. A lot of my philosophies of thinking, are also sort of in the mouths of different characters, and we all have different sides to us, and it's okay to put that into your characters. You're writing the things that you know about. So that's what I've tried to do, at least with this series.
Yeah, and there's that balance too between what you know and the pickles you put your characters in that you then have to innovate your way out of, right? Like that's part of the fun of the challenge of it.
Yeah, that's what they say. Write your protagonist into a corner and then just figure out what they're going to do to get out of it. And I can't tell you, I mean, I plot out all my books before I write them, but I always plot them out very loosely. And I can't tell you how many times, in fact, it's happening right now in, writing book 6, that as you're going through, the story develops on its own into something much better than you ever could have planned in advance. It just, as you're organically done, then you're like, I thought I was going to do it this way, but now my character's here and I see this other thing. He would do it this way, and then next thing you know, you've got these subplots that are coming up and these twists and turns. Some of the best twists and turns in the series were things that just happened on the way to writing the book. So.
Wow, I love that. I love that, to be able to be surprised by our own imaginations and what the Holy Spirit inspires. And also, I just want to mention before we run out of time that you've done some webinars on YouTube, writing webinars, and we've got a link to one of them in the show notes. It's for middle grade writers. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, it was a webinar I did for Loyola Press, who's my publisher for the series and has been wonderful. They had a lot of curriculum that go out to schools and homeschools. And so they wanted me to do kind of a webinar on how can you incorporate Catholic fiction, not just my books, any Catholic fiction, into a curriculum. And that way you can sort of, supplement and enrich the kind of boring facts of the world with some of this literature, modern literature, if you will, by some of our, authors that are out there now.
Wonderful. And we're also linking out to Loyola's curriculum companions to the Harwood Mysteries. So you do not have to reinvent the wheel. We've got some great starting points for you. Also want to show you that we'll have a link to Tony's podcast, Shepherd's Pie. Again, we mentioned that in the bio, but just really kind of the messiness of life and dealing with our issues as Catholics, just so much fun. Yeah, any final thoughts to leave our audience with, Tony, as we start to wrap up?
Yeah, sure. As I'm winding down the Harwood Mysteries, finishing book 6, kind of in that melancholy way of like, coming to the end of a series.
Aww.
And this is really my first and only series that is currently out there. There actually is other stuff coming out. I know your listeners will be very interested in knowing that there's another series, not a series. There's a standalone modern mystery that is going to be coming out in February from our Sunday Visitor that I'm writing for part of the Eucharistic Renewal, and it's actually called Penny and the Stolen Chalice, and it basically takes place at a modern Catholic school, and a sixth grade girl who has to figure out who stole the chalice off the altar. And it allows kind of in the context of a mystery to sort of explore the mystery of the Eucharist during this time of Eucharistic renewal. So our Sunday Visitor had asked me to write that, and I that's something near and dear to my heart. So I had a lot of fun writing that. And I've got another series that's going to be starting up, in 2025. So, the Harwood Mysteries has been my baby now for all these many years, but I'm actually getting opportunities to write other things, which are also a lot of fun.
Wonderful. Absolutely love to hear that, Tony. So thrilled that you're out there really igniting our imaginations and drawing us into really fun, rich stories. And we got to get a link from you as soon as possible to your OSV book as well coming out. We want people to check out Penny and the Stolen Chalice. That's exciting. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you have a law student coming in any moment and you've squeezed us in here. So thank you so much for your generosity to our audience and to this program, Tony.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for all you do for homeschoolers, for Catholic writers, and also with your coaching too. I mean, you're helping people, and you're appreciated for that. So thank you.
All right, editor, leave that comment in. All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in. Please pray for us. We're praying for you too. Have a great day in the Lord. And that's our show for today. Our program is sponsored by homeschoolconnections.com. Be sure to subscribe to Homeschooling Saints and leave us an honest review. God bless you, and thank you for joining us.